Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm finally talking about A Court of Silver Flames. And with that I have finished the ACOTAR series and Throne of Glass series, so that is me on Sarah J Maas for a good while. I read the rest of the ACOTAR series last year and also Throne of Glass Book 1, and then I read all of the rest of the Throne of Glass series this year. As you can see by my channel, it's just pretty much the whole Throne of Glass series. And I think reading all of those did help improve my enjoyment of this one, because I was a little bit iffy on the rest of the ACOTAR series. I do quite like some of the romance in the world, but other than that there was some a lack of emotional impact and just some icks with the style of romance. I think it's the whole fae, males and females, these toxic masculine fae tendencies which just rub me up the wrong way a little bit. But it's almost like by staying in the Sarah J Maas kind of world for a while with Throne of Glass, I've almost gotten used to it a bit, and so my tolerance has increased for the whole fae thing, and therefore I'm appreciating it a little bit more. I also just think that maybe Sarah J Maas is better in third person, because the first three books of ACOTAR are, Feyre's perspective, they're all first person perspective, and it was fine, I think, but I think if I read it now, maybe I still wouldn't enjoy it as much, because Throne of Glass is all third person, this book is third person, and maybe her writing style just suits that better. I also like the multiple POVs. Throne of Glass obviously has loads of different POVs, and I think that adds a lot of tension, because some characters know things that other characters don't, and then you as the reader become quite omnipotent and you can see, the pieces moving into place, whereas in a first person narrative you don't get that when you don't have multiple POVs. This book takes you through Nesta and Cassian's point of views, so you can see the longing, you can see the yearning, you can see that she likes him and that he likes her, but the way they're acting is not always making that clear to each other. So they're constantly wondering things like, oh, she's not asked me to stay overnight, so she must not want that, and he's not staying the night, so he must not want that, and it adds a lot of tension that you as a reader can see, you just need to speak to each other and just be honest with each other, and it adds tension, which is good. There was also not as many icky moments. There was one moment where Nesta pissed herself, but that was the only one I can think of, whereas the other ACOTAR books, there's a lot of watery bubbles and things like that, which I'm do you have to go into that much detail? She's very granular about these kind of things in her writing, which also gives me the ick. But this book did not do that as much, so it didn't irk me or ick me out as often as the other ones did, which is always a plus, in a romance book. There was a lot of smut. This is definitely the smuttiest of all of the books in her series so far, and it was very porny. It wasn't as romantic until towards the end, when they're starting to be truthful about their feelings for one another. But yeah, it was a bit more just actual fairy porn. And I think this was enjoyable, but also because it's quite porn it was, there was things described that I'm that would definitely hurt in reality. And I think, Nesta's kind of in that space where she's self-loathing, she's depressed, she's got PTSD, she's been, using sex as a coping mechanism, and so she's kind of inviting and consenting to this. I'm not saying it was toxic or abusive or anything like that, because I think, they're both consenting and she wants it like that, but I think in real life that would probably not be as enjoyable as she then finds it in this book. It's very much a fantasy, like porn is. It's probably not something to necessarily emulate, even if you enjoy reading it, let's put it that way. The sex aside, the romance and the relationship between Cassian and Nesta was pretty nice to read about. I think for the most part he is super nice to her and supportive in nurturing her healing. He defends her when other people are very critical, but kind of holds her accountable when she needs to be held accountable. So I think for the most part they have a pretty healthy dynamic. It could be slightly better, but also Nesta is not in a healthy place, and so it's hard for them to have a really healthy dynamic in this situation. Nesta is riddled with PTSD and depression in this book. She is in the last one as well, in the Frost and Starlight novella. And in this book, she meets a couple of other characters that have also gone through a lot of really, really traumatic things. I thought it was super nice to see her go from, you know, a really mentally ill place to having this really good character development, learning, you know, healthy coping mechanisms, training her body and her mind, forming friendships with people that understand her and accept her despite her flaws, and coming out on the other side of that healing, you know, making amends for the mistakes that she's made while in this bad mental state. And I thought that was a real pleasure to read about. I think so many people give Nesta a lot of hate, including like everyone in this book apart from Cassian. Everyone's really harsh on her, and maybe it's because they don't understand that she like is experiencing PTSD and depression, and like, you know, this kind of suffering, mental suffering, doesn't always make you like a good person. It can make you do questionable things. It can make you, you know, act in a very flawed way. It can make you hurt other people because you're hurting inside. Not excusing that or like justifying it, but it is an explanation. And, you know, people like Nesta need support to get through that. And the characters do give her support, but it's not in the most empathetic of ways. They don't always like do a good job of making her feel loved. They don't seem to do a good job of trying to like understand why she's suffering so much. All of the other characters, you know, have gone through trauma themselves and have experienced trauma, but not in a way that made them lash out at other people so much. And so when Nesta lashes out, it feels like they're a little like, you know, we're all traumatized, like get over it, be a better person. But, you know, trauma affects everyone in different ways, and it's affected Nesta in a very different way. She actually kind of has like complex PTSD from her childhood, like her upbringing with her mother, her father, and like his inaction, and that kind of adds to the more acute PTSD of his death and, you know, the terror of the war and of being turned Fae in the cauldron, which has taken away her whole humanity. It's a little bit annoying when, like, in that scene where she has a nightmare, Rhys comes to help and he, you know, goes into her mind and he's like, oh, I didn't realise she was, you know, suffering so much. And it's like, it's obvious that she was, like, and yeah, you're sorry about it now, but it was very clear that she was obviously suffering a lot, and you were like just getting annoyed with her for being a bit of a bitch, rather than like having empathy at that time. Like, you don't need to physically go into someone's brain to have empathy for them, Rhysand. That empathy could have come way earlier, and I'm not saying like they should have continued to enable her behaviour, because like something did need to change. I think, you know, taking her away, making her train is a good solution. Like, it was an intervention that had to happen, but a bit more empathy earlier on could have gone a long way for her. Pacing wise, this book was quite slow. Most of it was focused on Nesta being in the house and training and sex scenes with Cassian, and that kind of went on and on and on. Like, and tonally, like having these like very like, porn-like scenes of smut alongside this kind of serious story of trauma and healing from traumas like rape and assault, and abuse, side by side with like the porn, was an interesting choice. I said this in my like Frost and Starlight video as well. You know, having this element of Emery talking about the wing clipping, which is obviously, you know, a metaphor for female genital mutilation, which is like a very serious topic, but then having it in surrounded by like silliness and smut. It's tonally odd. It's like I said in my Kingdom of Ash video about the torture. Like, there's some really extreme violence in these books alongside a lot of like fluff and smut, and it makes for a strange juxtaposition that makes me like a little bit uncomfortable, because I almost feel like these topics of like really traumatic stuff should be handled with a little bit more care, but at the same time, you know, life has a big range. Life has, you know, fun sex and it has horror, and, you know, these books seem to marry up the two. but in a way that makes me slightly uncomfortable. And I know a lot of people probably don't share that opinion because these books are very popular, but you know, there are people that hate these books as well. So I'm wondering if you're like one of the haters, like, do you agree with this point? Like, is that what makes you hate this book? Because I don't hate it. This was my favourite book of the series. I enjoyed it, but yeah, it still makes me conflicted at times when I'm reading it. Like, I'm not 100% on board, but I kind of have to put those things aside to just enjoy it. And I think I'm still making up my opinion on it of like, is this okay or is this not okay? I'm not sure. I'd be interested to hear other people's opinions. And then of course we have a broader plot which is interesting, and we didn't focus enough on it in my opinion. Like, this is where the pacing could have been corrected a little bit. We have Koschei and Braylon and this potential new war that's going to break out. Mor's away a lot of the time trying to get alliances, and we don't see any of that, so that leaves up a lot of questions. We have, you know, them having to find the trove. Nesta has to find the trove, and like all of the other books in this series, like Sarah J Maas's plot just revolves around like getting things. So we have to get this part of the book, and then get that part of the book, and then get the Veritas orb, and then get the mask and the harp and the crown, and we have to get these things from all of these different places, and then we'll be able to do this thing. It's just, I guess it's a good plot device for like exploring different parts of the world, which is good because the world is quite interesting and I want to see as much of it as possible. But like, we could do some more things besides just getting things. And we could have spent more time doing that, because her going to the prison was interesting, her going to the middle was interesting, going to that moor, which was very much like the Dead Marshes in Lord of the Rings. And I would have liked to see more of that, but I think we will see more of that in upcoming books. Obviously, a lot of questions are left open at the end. There's a lot of questions around like Asriel, like he's going through a lot right now, it's kind of said in this book, but we don't find out what he's going through. We don't find out as much about Mor and what she's been up to on the continent. We don't find out as much about Lucien or Elaine. I really don't like Elaine. Her and Nesta have a fight in this book, and that's pretty much all that happens with Elaine in this book. We see her at Christmas being awkward and avoiding Lucien, and Asriel maybe looking sad because there's potentially a romance or some feelings there. But there's a lot of open questions about her, and there was nothing really in this book to kind of advance her plot or make me intrigued to find out more about her and how she is developing. So if the next book really is from her point of view, I'm not sure if I'm going to enjoy it as much, because I just don't think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in there. Hopefully there is on the inside, but Nesta was like way more compelling and interesting as a character to follow for a whole book than Elaine is. So don't know how I feel about that. I would rather just, honestly, a trilogy from Nesta's point of view. I do think seeing more of Asriel's point of view would be good if we're going to have a romance between Elaine and Asriel. He's more interesting than Elaine is. But, you know, there's this question of Lucien and the mating bond, and there's also questions, you know, theories on there about Elaine being with Tamlin. Don't know if I like that idea, because Tamlin, I mean, he's just running about like a beast in this whole book, which is interesting, but you know, I would like to see what happens with his character. But I can see where the theories come from, even though I'm not sure they're a good match, just because Tamlin's so wounded, and you know, he did like lose his temper and become quite controlling and abusive with Feyre. So I'm not sure I'd want that for Elaine, even though like she's not my favourite. Maybe her like gentle character would help him heal. I would like to see him heal and like get better and improve those things. So that could be an interesting story. There are allusions to Elaine not fitting into the Night Court, like she doesn't look good in the dress when they visit the Court of Nightmares. And you know, they visit the Spring Court and they kind of reflect on like, this would be perfect for Elaine because of all the flowers. So you know, I think she would be happy in the Spring Court. I'm just not sure that she would be happy with Tamlin or with Lucien in the Spring Court. So that remains to be seen. And if she doesn't end up with Asriel, then I don't know what's going to happen with Asriel, because I feel like he kind of needs someone. I seen someone suggest he could be with Gwyn. That would be quite a cool pairing, but I didn't see a lot of like actual romantic chemistry between them in this book, so we'd have to wait and see. And obviously he's maybe still pining after Mor, who is a lesbian and so doesn't like him, and that's a whole thing. So yeah, there's a lot of material for a book from Asriel's POV and from Elaine's POV, incorporating Tamlin and Lucien and Gwyn potentially into a really big messy kind of love hexagon. But how it's gonna go and who's gonna end up with who, I'm not sure. But I think that would add some drama and some interest to a book from Elaine's point of view, because like I don't think she's gonna bring a lot of internal conflict to that, apart from like who am I going to be with. So yeah, I'm intrigued for the next book. I want to find out what happens with the whole war and everything, but we'll see. Might not be my favourite. I think Nesta and Cassian are the GOAT. And Feyre and Rhys, like they had a plot point which I just completely forgot to mention in this book, of Feyre being pregnant and the baby having wings and her, you know, nearly dying, Nesta saving them, which was nice. But yeah, that whole plot point kind of rubbed me up the wrong way, that they didn't tell Feyre and everyone kept it from her, including Rhys. No, it was coming from a good place, but I feel very strongly like it's her body and it's her choice, and like she has a right to know, even if it's gonna add some fear. She's gonna be in fear at the end anyway, so I think, you know, letting her know that so that she had maybe some options would have been good. You know, I'm very kind of pro-choice in these situations. It feels like this would have been the perfect kind of circumstance for an abortion, where it would be completely justified because the baby and her are going to die, and Rhys is going to die also because it's mad bargain. So the book felt very like pro-life coded, and like yeah, obviously they want the baby to live and Feyre to live. They love the baby, and I understand all of that completely, and they're choosing the baby and they wouldn't want an abortion, but like it putting everyone's life in danger, it would still be a justified choice. So it was weird. It felt like a bit of a pro-life, pro-choice debate in which like choice was never considered. And I get that it's because abortion isn't really a thing in this world, but they do have contraceptive teas, and they do have kind of abortion teas for early pregnancy and all of these things. So if Feyre had known earlier, if they'd told her, I feel like, you know, they work their way around a lot of these plot holes in these books, and they could have worked their way around an abortion, and that would have been justifiable. Wouldn't have been the nicest thing to read about, would have been quite a dark topic, but this wasn't a nice thing to read about either. It was very like House of the Dragon coded, where they do the C-section even though it's going to cost the life of the mother, which was a horrific scene to watch in House of the Dragon. So it's not like the book doesn't go into darkness and horror and torture and like really dark areas, so they could have gone into abortion, but that was just never a question. And I feel like it should have been at least explored as an option. It should have been discussed, but they just never discussed it. But anyway, I'm glad it all worked out for the best, and Nesta came in as like a deus ex machina to like save the day with all of the trove. You know, I'm glad that these books, as dark as they can get, they always end up with a happily ever after, even when it seems like a little bit of a kind of plot device. But them all dying would have been a downer ending, so I'm glad that didn't happen. They've been saved a lot. Like Feyre dies and comes back to life in book 1. Rhys dies and comes back to life in book 3. Both of them pretty much, and the baby, all pretty much die and come back to life in this book. So is this the last that they're going to die and come back to life? Don't know. Might happen again. That remains to be seen. Let me know what you thought of Court of Silver Flames. Let me know what you think is going to happen in the next book and what you think the title might be. Let's have a brainstorm in the comments. And also, like, should I read Crescent City? Because, like, no part of me honestly wants to read it. Like, I'm not interested in it at all. But I have come to enjoy the style of Sarah J Maas. So I could read it. I could. Maybe next year. Definitely not this year. But I did say I was reluctant to read the whole Throne of Glass series, and then did, so I am full of shit sometimes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!